Today's Respect Perspective is called Let's Take Score. This conversation isn't about blame, it's about reflection. In sports, the scoreboard tells the truth about performance. It doesn't care about intentions, effort, or explanations. It simply reflects outcomes. Organizations are no different. At some point, every organization has to pause and ask a simple but powerful question. What does the score actually say? Before the next initiative, before the next strategy, before the next culture program, this is a moment for something organizations rarely do well. Pause and reflect honestly. This reflection is about the behaviors, patterns, and decisions that shape organizational performance every single day. Because progress doesn't begin with a new program, it begins with honest evaluation. Organizations are constantly launching new ideas, new strategies, new initiatives, new culture statements, new leadership models. Every year brings another wave of programs designed to improve performance. But underneath all of that activity sits an uncomfortable question. Are we actually improving? Or are we simply repeating the same playbook with different language? Because sometimes the problem isn't the strategy, sometimes the problem is the pattern. There is a well-known phrase often attributed to Einstein. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing repeatedly while expecting different results. Yet this pattern appears frequently inside organizations. The same behaviors, the same blind spots, the same avoided conversations, and eventually, the same outcomes. But when it happens inside organizations, we often call it something different. We call it progress. Research consistently shows that up to 70% of organizational change initiatives fail. That number is staggering. But the reason often isn't a lack of intelligence. It's not that organizations don't understand their problems. And it's rarely because the strategy itself is flawed. The reason is much simpler. Behaviors remain unchanged. Structures evolve, policies get updated, but the patterns that drive behavior often remain exactly the same. Organizations often attempt to solve performance problems with structural solutions. New tools, new policies, new programs, new initiatives. But most organizational problems are not structural. They are behavioral. Performance doesn't improve simply because a new system was introduced. Performance improves when people change how they behave, communicate, and hold one another accountable. Until behavior changes, outcomes rarely do. Another major blind spot inside organizations is the perception gap around accountability. Leaders often believe accountability exists within the organization, but employees frequently experience something very different. When accountability becomes inconsistent, several things happen. Standards begin to drift, expectations become unclear, and performance slowly declines. Accountability is not a slogan printed on a wall. It is a daily behavior practiced consistently by everyone in the organization. Culture presents a similar challenge. Many leaders believe their organization has a strong culture, but employees sometimes experience something entirely different. This gap often exists because culture is measured through things like statements, surveys, and branding. But culture isn't defined by what we say. Culture is revealed through behavior, how people communicate, how problems are handled, and what the organization consistently allows. The most dangerous moment in any organization is when dysfunction becomes normalized. When certain behaviors are tolerated long enough, they stop being seen as problems. They simply become the way things are done here. Poor communication, inconsistent standards, unresolved conflict, underperformance that is ignored. Over time, repeated tolerance slowly shapes the culture. What was once a concern becomes accepted reality. One of the biggest misconceptions about culture is that it belongs solely to leadership. But culture is shaped by everyone. Every individual contributes through daily decisions. How we communicate with colleagues, how we respond when problems appear, how we hold one another accountable, and whether we support the standards the organization claims to value. Culture is not what we say we believe. Culture is what we consistently allow. Professionalism is often misunderstood. Many people believe professionalism means remaining quiet, avoiding conflict, or maintaining harmony at all costs. But true professionalism includes something deeper: honesty. accountability, integrity, and the courage to address difficult issues. Doing the right thing inside organizations is not always comfortable. But professionalism without integrity is simply avoidance with better manners. Globally, studies show that approximately 85% of employees are disengaged at work. That number represents a massive loss of energy, creativity, and performance. But disengagement rarely appears overnight. It grows slowly through repeated experiences, unclear expectations, unresolved issues, inconsistent accountability, a lack of ownership. Avoidance might feel easier in the moment, but over time, the cost becomes enormous. So, if we paused today and honestly evaluated our organization, what would the scorecard reveal? How consistent are our standards? How clearly do we communicate expectations? How often do we address problems directly? How accountable are we to the values we promote? How aligned are our behaviors with our intentions? These questions are not about assigning blame. They are about something far more valuable: honesty. Organizations begin to improve when reflection becomes honest. Not defensive, not political, but honest. Because real progress rarely begins with the next initiative. It begins with a difficult but necessary question. What patterns are we repeating? Before the next strategy, before the next culture program, before the next change initiative, pause. Look honestly at the patterns inside the organization and ask one final question. A question every organization eventually has to confront. What does the score actually say?